Good afternoon, everyone. Country Flyboy here, and today, more on ADE. So, we're going to be doing several things. I want to show you adding library objects as well as aprons and whatnot. One last thing I want to mention, I've connected all the parking spots, and I went ahead and added the rest of the hold short nodes along the runway since we taught that before. I looked at the satellite image, and there is a hold short line here indicating and further backing up my theory that this, even though it is a closed runway, is being used as a taxiway. Now, I want to look at the runway markings real quick. We see that this runway, as faded as it is, we can still make out that this has the numbers and a center line, and this one does indeed have precision runway markings. We just want to verify that's what the runways have. Remember, everything doesn't show up in ADE correctly, but we do want to check and make sure all the markings are correct. And we can back this up when we get in FSX and see it. Alrighty, so all the markings are correct. I've added the hold short nodes. Everything's good to go. So this apron here. This apron looks to be made out of asphalt, just looking at it. Very, very faded asphalt, but asphalt nonetheless. I want to show you a neat feature. Let me move this out the way. If you hold down Control and then move the scroll wheel on your mouse, you can rotate around the airport. You're not rotating the airport, you're rotating your camera viewpoint. So I tend to find viewpoints that work, and we'll make use of them. This one looks like it'll work the best. Now remember, aprons will overwrite or will be overridden by taxiways. Now, looking at this airport, this looks like really, really faded asphalt right here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to set it to concrete, however, and we're just going to draw an apron. Now, it looks like it branches out from this taxiway here, goes underneath these two hangars. So what we're going to do is I'm going to put a line here, then here, come out over here, go over here, we'll connect here. There's a straight line following it down to here, where we will go back to here. Don't worry about getting it precise the first time around. We just need to get it close. We can fine-tune it later. There we go. Now, FSX is going to be nice enough to draw a nice arc from here to here for us. Thank you, FSX. You are awesome. See? It's going to draw a nice little arc to connect up here, because this is a taxiway right here, and it will draw the pavement marks. Now, the rest of this looks like asphalt. Now, if you don't... I'm going to show you a trick if you don't want to mess with GP objects to get different shades of asphalt. So, asphalt, by the default texture for asphalt is 1. It looks like faded. It looks kind of like this. Well, actually, it looks kind of like that. But if you want this darker looking asphalt, you can actually use Tarmac, which uses the same texture as asphalt, but is darker. So if you know you're going to be using default textures, you can make use of that. Now, I'm going to draw this apron a little bit differently. I'm going to actually click and hold down the left mouse button as I draw these vertexes. And you can see that draws a nice convenient line for you to make use of. I'm just going to come over here. We'll drop it straight down. And we'll just follow the taxiway around. Now here, I'm going to go back to using my just one little click method. Here, here. Now, I put an extra vertex there I didn't really need. That's because I want to do this. If you select the apron, then select a vertex, you can delete that vertex. If you select the apron and put your mouse over the line but drawn between the vertexes, hold down Control and click, you can add a vertex. And you can reshape this however you need to. So don't be afraid or don't be mad if you don't get it matching up 100% first time. You can always come back and fine-tune it. Just get it close when you're initially drawing it, and then we'll come back and fine-tune, just like that. Now also remember, you can make these transparent so you can see the image overlaid underneath it. Alright, we need to move this over here. There we go. So I made this these taxiway links here, I made them asphalt off camera because if you look at the satellite image right there, it's one big thing of asphalt. Now, to get this nice little curve where it's concrete then moves into asphalt, that is doable, but it's a bit problematic. So I went ahead and made this asphalt, so it's going to be all asphalt here until you get to these side bits, then it's concrete. Alright, let's start adding some objects. Now we see there are 2 fuel tanks right here. I'm going to right click, go to Add, select Library Object, and it brings up the installed libraries. Now I have a ton. I have a metric ton of installed libraries. ADE will ship with all default libraries installed, and you can add more to it using the Library Object Manager. I'll try to make use of some default libraries for now, though. Now, the objects we want are fuel tanks. There's 2 types, or there's several different types, but they're in 2 different databases. Airport objects contains all the objects you need for an airport. There's various types of hangars, various sizes, helipads, 2 different types of helipads, by the way. We'll get into them in a minute. And various little objects like control towers, localizer antennas, stuff like that. What we're looking for is called large fuel tank. Right there it is. You can see it's a long fuel tank, and it lines up just perfectly with that. Now, we're not actually going to be using it as a refueling station because there seems to be one right there. What we're going to do is we're going to place these 2 right next to each other, copy and paste. You saw me do that. And those will be the storage tanks, and there looks like there's an actual fuel station right here that the planes pull up to. There are several different sizes of fuel stations supported by FSX by default. There's 1 large, 2 medium, one of them has an overhang, and then there's also 2 smalls, one like that and one like that. We're going to go with the medium fuel station without the overhang. Like that. We'll plop that in. Now, library objects in ADE are shown with full size. So, if I add one of the larger hangars up here, you can see that's the full size of that hangar. Now I want to show you another thing. Some library objects actually have animations attached to them. Let me a second to find it. Let's see. Vehicles, land, truck, explosion, I believe. Yeah, this one right here. Look how freaking big that is. That library object there is just a single truck placed right there at that red dot. That red dot, by the way, marks the center point of that object, and you can rotate it around that point. There's a truck right there. Now, this library object has an animation attached to it where that truck will explode and send fragments flying all over the place. So if I were to place this here, and it loops, it explodes, sends fragments everywhere, burns for about 3 minutes, then explodes again. It magically comes back to one piece and then explodes again, loops for 3 minutes, then repeats. That's the animation loop going on right there. So it's showing how far out it's going to fling fragments. So the object itself is not this big, but it's one small object there that does an animation that goes out this far. Another I can show you, and this would be a better example. If I go to Vehicles Aircraft and find Heli Blackhawk Army Area 51 Mission AN, which means animate. Look how thrilling big this one is. Is it actually that big? Does it actually have a Blackhawk object that big? No. It's one tiny little Blackhawk that actually flies around inside this square. Side note, for some reason, some objects in ADE, if they're placed by ADE, they won't animate correctly. So you might want to play, if you want to use this particular object, you might want to place it with a library object placer, such as that one from Flight 1 that I can't remember the name of, Instant Scenery. And yeah, it has a little object flying around in there. So that red dot's the center point, and you note objects will rotate around it. There we go. And we'll place it right here. the fuel station up right about there. Now, there's another thing we need to add to the fueling station. If you were to this is just marked as a fuel parking spot. If you wanted to park your airplane here and have it actually refill your tanks, like it would if you really parked at the fuel station in real life, what you need to do is add a fuel trigger. If we select the parking spot, right-click, go to Add, you see this particular parking spot has an extra offset we can add, fuel trigger. And you want to select which types of fuel this fuel trigger will fill up. So we want it to fill up both avgas and we'll say Jet A+, since that's what the airport has. We want it to be very sparse. Image complexity controls the scenery complexity setting. So the scenery complexity setting in Flight Sim, you can set it to very sparse all the way up to extremely dense. Some objects will only appear above certain settings. So if you set it to dense, this fuel trigger will not appear unless the user's scenery complexity setting was dense or higher. Set fuel trigger and airport critical objects like the beacon and stuff like that need to be set to very sparse. Next thing we want to do is we want no crash detect. That will kill the crash detection of an object. So you can actually run your airplane into it, and even if crash detection is enabled in the simulator, it won't trigger a crash. That's pretty much needed if you want to place any open hangars. Like, let's see, that one right there. That's an open hangar. If you want the user to be able to actually put their plane inside of it, you need to disable the crash detection on there. Okay, speaking of hangars, we have some here. We got, obviously, look, a couple of medium and small. T-hanger right here. Let's add some hangars. Now, I'm going to show you two ways. We're going to add a generic hanger here for our row hanger, T-hanger. The way we do that is we go to Add, Generic Building. Now, I've got several. You can get this from the ADE website, I believe, a download that has a lot of extra buildings for you to use. Now, generic buildings are just that. They are square or rectangular buildings with a generic texture. That's it. They're very good because you don't need to include any extra files with your scenery. These particular buildings are nothing more than textures. You're basically telling Flight Sim where you want a texture to be drawn with these buildings. That means you don't have to include anything because these ship with Flight Sim X. So what we're going to do is we're going to add a row hanger, find out that it's way too damn big, and we're going to use the measure tool to get the overall length and width of this hanger. And we can see that it is 359 by 52 feet. So we want to select a generic hanger roughly that size. Now you can see it's got dimensions here on the side. This is in meters, however, so I got to do a little bit of mental math here. We know that one's way too big. That one's probably going to be too long. That's way too small. Let's place this one. It's still too big. Although the length is about right. We can get away with that length, but we need a smaller size, I believe. Alrighty, back to hangers. It's a bit annoying that you gotta reset this every single time. Let's see here. Just trying to find one. Oh, that one looks like it'll work. That's 78 by 22. Oh, that one works nicely. It's just a little bit longer. Alrighty, we'll add one more. And if you're wondering, you can stack these up to get bigger looking hangers. That was 78 by 22 was the last one we placed. That one right there. 18 by 17, 81 by 26. Let's try this one, 95 by 39. It's too big. Anyway, you can place generic buildings there. I'm actually going to use a library object. I'm going to use a non-default one just because, well, they look nicer. Art Poley is a great, fantastic freeware senior developer, and he graciously, kindly let me use his library objects in my sceneries. Thank you, Art, for that. He has made 4 different library objects of various airport buildings, mostly hangars, that we're going to make use of. What we're looking at here is most likely a T hangar. So he's got a T hangar object here. Let's see if it fits. It's a little too small. So library objects are a bit different than the generic buildings. Let me look at one of his other databases here. T hangar, T hangar. Let's try this one. Still too small. A little bit bigger. Try that one. Ooh, that one works nice. So this is just a little bit small. Looks like it'll work nicely. So library objects can be scaled up. Now you also notice you can change their pitch, bank, and altitude. So if you wanted to put, say there was an ocean right down here and you wanted to put a ship sinking in it, you would place the ship, let's say vehicles, water, let's just put the cargo ship here, and we'll change its pitch to minus 25 degrees, and we'll have a bank of 10.0. Pitch, we'll just say 25 since it got rid of the negative. There we go. And now it's still going to be drawn the same, but when you get in Flight Sim, you'll see that ship there. It's pitching forward at 25 degrees and banking 10 degrees to the right, I believe. Yeah, that'll be to the right. And it'll look like a ship that's sinking, which is a neat little trick. But we can also scale library objects up, which is what we need to do here. So if we select the properties, and we'll just scale this up to about 0.2, 0.1, that'll work. Oh, that works perfectly. Just a wee bit bigger than it really needs to be. Let's scale it back down to, say, 1.8. There we go, smack dab where we need it to be. So we've now used this object with a nice thumbnail here, and we've scaled it up by 0.18, so it's going to be 1.18 size. Bigger than normal. Now, that's a T hangar. We got other hangars here. Looks like there's 2 small ones here. I'll use one of Art's hangars to put here again. I know he's got a small one that will work perfectly right there. That one. Put that in right there. Got another one here. It's like a, looks more like a regular old just boxed hangar. How big is that? That's a little too big. And yeah, you basically just go around, when you got thumbnails for the different library objects, you can sort of just pick which one will work best. Now, real quick, I'm going to edit this so that it doesn't take too long. Alright, so real quick, I'll go ahead and finish placing these objects. Alright, so I went ahead and placed all the hangars. You may be wondering, how do you know which side of the hangar, just from looking at this, that the door is on? Well, it comes with practice. I know that most of Art's objects are oriented in a way that the door is right here where this little black speck is. So they're essentially backwards. But you really don't know until you get in the sim after you compile this and install it in the simulator and see what it actually looks like. So you really don't know that until you actually look at it. So what next? We've placed hangars. I want to talk about animated hangars. None of these hangars are animated. They're all static. They're open all the time. Now, you'll have to do some digging on your own, but you can download animated hangars. I have a library here called Dog Hangars, Add Dog Hangars, and a lot of these hangars are animated. So when you tune your nav2 radio to a certain frequency, the door will open. Nice little freeware objects that, can't remember who made these, but I thank you because they're really, really nice objects. So you can add animated hangars. And yes, you can also, if you know 3D modeling skills, you can make your own hangars to add here, just like any other library object. It's a bit more finicky and beyond the scope of this tutorial, and not just because I don't know how to do it, but that is doable. That is entirely doable. Now we see we have a taxiway leading right here that loops around the back of these hangars. Now, there does appear to be a center line there just looking at it, but we're going to take a bit of creative license, and we are not going to do that. I have just realized that I want that to be asphalt, not tarmac. What we're going to do is we're going to draw an apron there instead. So I am going to just draw out this apron as if it was this taxiway here. Goes all the way over there, comes down to here, boop, 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 all the way to here, then here, then here, and then down to here. So we now have a nice little wannabe taxiway going on here. So I've drawn this taxiway with the apron tool instead of the taxiway tool, just because, well, I don't think any AI or user airplane is going to be taxiing along back here ever, really. So it'll be more effective to just have this as a taxiway. Now I'm gonna fine tune it a bit by adding some vertexes to it, and we're gonna draw the extensions up to these hangars. Now I'm not gonna draw them exactly the way they are in the picture. I'm just gonna draw them like this. So you now have pavement extending from this taxiway up to those hangars. There we go. People need to be able to park their planes, you know. Got another one here. Looks like we can draw this as one taxiway. So what we're going to do is we're going to use the apron tool again to draw this. We're going to follow along the satellite image, relatively closely. It doesn't have to be exact. Remember, you can go back and fine tune. And don't worry about making it look exactly right either, because it's always best to get something that works, not something that matches your satellite image 100%. You'll drive yourself crazy trying to get things to match the satellite image, so don't even bother. Just try to get it close. That's all you got to do. There we go, and we will fine tune a bit by moving this out so it's nice and squared off. You look fine. You look passable just now. Alright, so we've got our aprons placed where all the airplanes are going to be taxiing. We're going to talk a few more airport markings. Now, real quick, we're going to turn our attention to this closed runway. If we look at the satellite image, we can see that it draws X's halfway up the runway in two places, as well as the tops and bottoms of the runway. But FSX will only draw the X at the beginning and end, at the DER and the AER. We want an X here and here. I'm going to show you how you can do that. There's two ways you can put X's here. You can use library objects if someone has been nice enough to make some library objects. I got one here, Runway Markings, which is just a library object of runway markings. So I can place any runway marking anywhere I want. However, these are fixed and do not change with the runway. For example, threshold stripes indicate how wide a runway is. If you were to make this wider, say if we upped it back to 150 feet the way it is by default, you can see the number of threshold stripes increase. Versus if we go back to just 100 feet where it actually is, it decreases. So it will change the number of threshold stripes depending on the size of the runway, just like it would in real life. But unfortunately, making use of these library objects, one, it adds more objects, which increases the frame rate impact your scenery is going to have. Two, they can be a little bit problematic. You got to make sure the crash is detected and scenes stuff and all that. There's another way to do this, and we're going to make use of a feature that is on newer versions of ADE. So this is 1.6 was the first version of ADE to include this feature. First, I'm going to draw a helper shape, and we're going to make it a rectangle that is 50 by 50. We're going to put it right where we want it. Right there. I'm going to copy it. We want it there, and we're going to place the other one right here, just like that. Now we're going to use this tool here. This is the Custom Ground Line, GP Line tool. We're going to put a vertex here, and we're going to double click to put our last vertex here. You always double click your last vertex to finalize. We're going to make the line width 10, and we're going to select the texture to be yellow. Now, this is a neat feature. This allows you to essentially paint textures in some places. So it's got several different textures you can pick from, including parking lines. You can see it's got a hold short, apron limit, enhanced taxiway center line, regular taxiway center line, including different colors, doubles, dashes of different lengths, even a double dash. It's got all sorts of stuff to pick from. I quite often make use of the apron limit because there's no other way to really draw that. But it's also got things you can actually add with this tool. You can add things like painted taxiway signs, where they paint the taxiway signs on the pavement instead of having a sign off to the side. You can do that with this. You can have different shades of asphalt. So you can have asphalt light, medium, or dark. A fancy concrete texture really looks more like cement than concrete. Nice dirt texture, gravel, red, white. We're interested. Oh, you can also paint words on your taxiways. Look at that. We're interested in the hash marks. We're interested in the yellow right there. And we'll do the same thing right here. Its line width is 10. Select yellow. There we go. Voila, we have our X. What's good about this is it has little to no frame rate impact and lets you draw an X, and you can use it without having to download a third-party library object, which usually comes with some restrictions. Like, I got one library here that small airstrip objects. God, I can't remember the guy who made this. Lots of fantastic objects here, including parking tees, little cones, including a working wind tee. It's got a wind tee right there, actually, including a faded one, and this will actually change direction with the wind. However, the guy who made it doesn't want you to include it with your scenery. He wants you to tell people about it so they can download it separately. I don't like that. When I make sceneries, I want everything to be included, because the first thing I do when I look at a scenery and I see its README says go download about 500,000 other things in order to get to work, I delete that scenery without even installing it. I ain't got that kind of time. Include it or don't bother. That's my philosophy. Now, I still use that particular library object, and I do say go download it, but I tend to avoid overusing it. I don't use it that often, is what I'm trying to say. That way, I'll mention it, and if the person does decide they want to go download it, they can, or if they've already downloaded it, they see the objects. So we're going to repeat the process up here. But using these GP lines is much better, because ADE will export everything you need to have this work in your scenery. So this will work for anybody. They don't need to download anything extra. You can include it with the scenery, and it works, and it looks fantastic. It looks really good. Okay, so we have an X there. We got other things we can do. If we wanted to, we can actually get this to show up correctly, where we have, see right now, if we were to export this entire ramp's going to be one shade of asphalt. But remember, it was two different shades of asphalt in the satellite image. I'm going to make this pretty much invisible so I can see the underlying image and this ramp here too as well. And I'm going to mention we can draw a GP object over these. Now, these GP objects are nothing more than textures. So you still need to have an underlying apron underneath them, or FSX is going to think you're taxiing across grass. But we'll show you this feature real quick. If we put a line, draw it around here to here. Now, we need to be a little bit careful because GP objects will overwrite everything. They will overwrite runway textures, they will overwrite taxiways, and apron textures. So, when we draw this, and we're going to select this to Asphalt Light, this is going to overwrite everything. See how this center line here extends from the taxiway, nice little arc, and goes in there? It's going to arc, and when it hits that, it's going to disappear. I'll show you what I mean by that when we compile a first test version, so you can see what I'm talking about. And we'll do the same thing here. And we'll actually make this one, I think we'll make this one the, we'll make this one the concrete texture so you can see what that one looks like. And this one right here, I just realized we don't need these vertexes. Right here. There we go. Just like that. And we'll draw one last one from here to here, and here, and here. We'll select this one, Asphalt Medium, which is slightly darker. The Asphalt Dark is like freshly paved asphalt that's only a few days old. This one here has got a few years on it, and this one here is so freaking faded it might as well be concrete. But we'll select Asphalt Medium, slightly darker. And you'll see how that looks in the sim. But note that we have lines. There should be a line drawn from here to the parking spot. When we get in the sim later, you're going to see that these GP objects will overwrite everything. However, there is a way to get lines to show up. You can actually draw your own custom taxiway lines. So, say we wanted to have a taxiway line, an apron limit line going here. And let's just draw it. I'm not going to actually do this, but we would say apron limit about 4 feet wide is good. Select patterns, then select apron limit. You can give it a backing if you want. So if we wanted it to be 5 feet for the backing, that means it's going to extend 5 feet from the center line. So we're going to have about half a foot either side of this. So this line here, the apron limit line, is going to get painted across 4 feet wide, and then 6 inches either side of that, we're going to have this texture. We can have it be anything we want, including the line base texture, which is that dark sort of rubber that they put on and then paint the taxiway lines on it so that they stand out amongst the pavement better. Or you can just leave it blank and not have a backing, which is what we'll do. Now, when we got in the sim, we'd actually see the apron limit line sitting over top of the GP object. Now, I don't encourage you to use GP objects if you are new to scenery design, because GP objects are real confusing. There's a thing called drawing layers that even I don't know much about. It's a bit problematic if you don't know what you're doing. So I do recommend just making use of the default stuff when you can, and use GP objects sparingly. Now, what about the FBO here? Well, we can see that this is a neat little FBO with a pitched roof, and although we could put pitched roof buildings there, we could put library objects there to represent an FBO. If we go back to Art's lovely objects, you can see he has several FBO objects we can use. Most of them are flat roof, though. And there are a few defaults. There's 3 of them. There's FBO Tiny, Large, and Extra Large, which even has a built-in hangar. I think what I will do, however, is I will put one of the Easy Terminal objects there. This is another library object I've downloaded. You can get these libraries. They're on flightsim.com. You can just search for their names, Easy Terminals, Dog Hangars, or any of Art Poley's latest sceneries comes with his library objects. And if you ask nicely, he might let you use them. So we'll find a little terminal that'll work. That's too big. That's a little too big. The rest of these are a little on the small side. Let's place this one. And we'll put it right here just like that. That'll be our FBO. It's actually a terminal, and it says departures on one side, arrivals on the other. But nice little object. I use it quite a bit as an FBO. Because it does look like a general aviation FBO. Alright, we've done aprons. We've connected everything up. Believe it or not, we could actually compile this scenery now and see how it works. But we're going to do a few extra things that I'm going to cover in the next video. So I hope you enjoyed this one, and we will see you next time.